I don't know if people outside of DC know this, but there's like a hobby, almost a competition between people who work in DC about naming things, right? Like on the Hill, acronyms that say like 25 different things in them. That's like a badge of honor. If you can get a law passed that has some like crazy long acronym, right? EOs are great because you hear the voice of the president or the person at, the National Security Council that wrote this thing. We have today to discuss EO 14269, restoring America's maritime dominance. Yeah, that's pretty damn clear. Maritime dominance. Why do we need an EO on that? Because America has not been maritime dominant for a very long time, right? You think about this, go back to, the founding of the nation, right? We get our asses kicked by Britain for a really long time because they had a really huge navy and we didn't. We had colonists with muskets. After we said, fuck that and kicked their asses out, we started building a navy. American maritime dominance and our ability to project power on the seas led to the U.S. leadership globally, access, commerce, the safety of global maritime shipping and trade in a way that if we didn't do that or somebody else had done it first, we'd be living in a much different world. Well, somewhere around the time where we just said, well, fuck it, we'll just outsource all of our manufacturing to countries that we may or may not be friends with or may or may not be our number one stated adversary in the future. We also stopped building ships. We have almost no shipbuilding capabilities in the United States today. It's a huge problem because ships aren't being built fast enough. They're not being built in the quantities that we need them. And once they're built and they need to go in for maintenance and repairs, they're sitting in docks, dry docks, wet docks forever to get fixed. Why? Because we don't have enough people in shipbuilding to do all the things we need to do because we don't have a shipbuilding industry in the US anymore. That's moved out predominantly to China. We have some great partners and allies overseas, specifically in South Korea, make great ships. But the president, through his EO, said 14269, restore America's maritime dominance. So here we go. What is in this new EO? Why does it matter for you? First and foremost, I am not under the false assumption that any startup out there is going to challenge the large primes to build an aircraft carrier. Check. Got it. But as we've seen in modern conflicts, the war in Ukraine, there is a place for this new maritime domain that may not be giant aircraft carriers and destroyers. They may be smaller craft. They may be autonomous. They may be hybrid vehicles that are both air and maritime or surface and subsurface. Who knows? It's up to your creativity. That's why it's so awesome that we're doing CSOs. That's why it's so awesome that we're doing OTAs and all these other ways to do cool things, because the DoD should just be telling you their problems and you should be solving them. Well, guess what? There's a lot of maritime problems in the domain awareness space, on the surface of the oceans and the seas, and subsurface. So that's why if you do anything even remotely close to anything in the water, this one's going to matter. Why am I so itchy? Okay. First and foremost, what does this thing do? In plain English, it creates a whole of government maritime action plan. It directs the National Security Advisor of the United States of America to deliver a maritime action plan within 210 days. It has to have funding, regulation, workforce requirements and needs, and industrial-based capacity. Basically, this is going to be a disastrous report that says basically we have like 8.5 people in the US that still know how to build a ship. That's changing. We know that's changing. We've seen great companies come into the fight, get in the game. Specifically, the biggest one, and obviously everybody who's out there is like, well, obviously No shit. Saronic has raised a shit ton of money and has put a shit ton of capital investment into the nation's first autonomous shipyard, right? So you think these big shipyards, San Diego, Virginia, build big manned ships. Well, Saronic's putting a ton of investment into an autonomous shipyard facility that is equal essentially to the size of what we have seen in, standard privately owned or even the government owned shipyards in like Philly or places like that, right? So Maritime Action Plan, 210 days. It's going to be a disaster. It's going to say we don't do this stuff, which is the starting point for figuring out how to fix that. Okay, second, and this is a problem across a lot of things. Everybody's like, the DoD shouldn't be doing these things. Okay, sure, I got it. But then who, right? But then who? We've had this conversation with a lot of areas. Who should be leading efforts at the southern border? I agree with you. It's probably not the Department of Defense, but if you've seen the shit that the Department of Homeland Security and CBP has as far as technology, intelligence, resources, they don't have shit because they've been underinvested in it forever. And now everybody's like, the DoD is involved in the border. Yeah, because one, Title 10 very clearly states that there is a counter narcotics support to civilian agencies requirement for the DoD, but also they have the best technology in the world. And if we can help pass that on to some of our law enforcement brethren that are down at the border, that's actually a good thing. Should the DoD lead it? No. But should they be heavily involved? Yes. And we have the same thing in a lot of other areas. Who is supposed to be in charge of, I don't know, the things that aren't war, right? China trying to buy the Panama Canal. That would be way worse than most of the military stuff that they could do. If China bought the Panama Canal and said, the United States can't go through it anymore, the global impact that would have would be far greater than probably most any military action that they could take, short of dropping a nuclear bomb. So who's in charge of that stuff? Well, you'd say the State Department. Okay, cool. But like, are they really? Do they have the intelligence activities to be able to do that? Do they have the technical capabilities to watch trillions and trillions of transactions as China's CCP communist tentacles are maneuvering every contract, every agreement, every relationship, trying to manipulate, countries into being on their side over ours? The answer is no. Which is why their wolf warrior diplomacy, or whatever we're calling it today, actually works. This is why the Belt and Road Initiative works. You go into a shitty third world country and say, hey, would you like 4 or 5G infrastructure? Do you want Starlink? And they say yes. And they go, okay, well, you just have to be on our side and you have to hate America and you have to vote in the UN the way that we vote on everything. And we'll give you Starlink and 5G. And they're like, I don't know. I don't know if my people are going to be cool with that. And then they're like, also, we're going to make you a dictator and an oligarch, and we're going to give you money personally, and we're going to buy you a super yacht in the south of France. And they're like, bet, I'm in. That's a pretty easy proposition. I don't know if the State Department is prepared or capable to do that. So when the DoD starts doing stuff like that, and everybody goes, the DoD shouldn't do that. Well, then who else? Well, rant over. This executive order puts the DoD on point for shipbuilding. Why? Because no one else has done it for decades. So within 180 days, the DoD, along with, okay, every day he's like, DoD shouldn't do that, along with Commerce, Department of Transportation, and the Department of Homeland Security, who the Coast Guard is part of outside of war, must assess how DPA Title III, so large grants from the government to do natural resources and infrastructure investments, and private capital, here we go, my boys over at the Office of Strategic Capital, can improve shipbuilding. We're going to do a standalone episode on the Office of Strategic Capital, and if I can twist his arm, if at all possible, to come here and do an interview with us, I want to bring in the guy who started the whole thing. Be a great episode. Jason, I'm going to hit you up. All right. What this is going to do is improve shipyard capacity in ships, components, repair, ports, and workforce. All critically important. It also implements or seeks to implement or look for places in the 180-day report on trade measures that will make life more difficult for the People's Republic of China, and look at ways that we can offset some of their dominance in their manufacturing capabilities of ships. There is a terrifying video of what a shift change looks like at a Chinese shipyard. I mean, there's like no place in the United States outside of like New York City, Times Square on New Year's Eve, where you will see this concentration of people in the US at one time. It's nuts. And it's one of many. It closes loopholes in port fees and customs. It seeks a new maritime trust fund, which goes along with the president's ideas of a sovereign wealth fund. Make sure that OMB, back to the most important government organization that you've never heard of, the Office of Management and Budget, to develop legislative proposals for a durable funding source for multi-year predictable outcomes and multi-year procurement and spending. Real quick on multi-year procurement. If you want, let me know, comment, email me, whatever the hell it is. If you want a standalone episode on multi-year procurement, I'm happy to get into it. But the moral of the story is every year when the appropriations bills come out, they buy everything in whole for that year. So if we buy an aircraft carrier that year, we're buying the whole aircraft carrier. It's going to take a long time for it to build, and that's totally fine. If we buy, 100 more F-35s, they're going to take time to build. That's fine. The money that they use to do that, the procurement money, is good for 3 years. We'll go into colors of money in a completely different episode. But the colors of money are good for 3 years for procurement, so they can build it over a 3-year period. But the whole thing has to be bought year one in that appropriation. A lot of people are saying, look, man, buying, I don't know, I'll use F-35 for example. Buying 10 F-35 in 1 year is great, but how many are you going to buy the next year? And at this point, all you get is a foggy budget projection in the president's budget every year that says we think in the out years, which is called the FYDP, the Future Year Defense Program. We'll do an episode on that one. Is we think it's going to be this. Well, if you're a company, like most of you are, and you have to make investments in workforce, supply chain, manufacturing capability, you're like, yeah, I'm going to sell 10 this year, but what about next year, right? You don't know if there's going to be any consistency. So there's been a lot of talk about guaranteeing buy orders over a number of years to give the industrial base more confidence that this isn't a one and done kind of thing. This gets very complicated on the Hill. It gets very complicated in budgeting because it locks people in on long-term contracts. It creates kind of a perverse incentive structure for that vendor to perform on time and meet cost, schedule, and performance, because now they can kind of like kick back, put their feet up a little bit. So there's a balance here. In places like shipyards and in places like maritime and shipbuilding, it's going to be critically important that we do something like that and get it right. It designates maritime prosperity zones. Commerce, Treasury, and the DOT have to propose maritime prosperity zones that are similar to what we have in domestic policy of opportunity zones. And they have to pair relief and regulatory relief and investment incentives aligned to domestic capital in waterfront communities. Look, I don't know if anybody's ever been around a shipyard before, but they kind of suck. Got gross, kind of old. Now we're going to see initiatives that, hey, if you open up your business in like a hub zone, you'll get some brakes on things. Bring some more things around shipyards so it doesn't suck so bad to work in a shipyard that maybe, I don't know, people want to work there. Great idea. There's accelerated government vessel procurement reform. They have 90 days to figure out a better acquisition approach and how to forecast demand, reduce reviews, and use, once again, commercial acquisition to buy things in the maritime domain. What you're seeing here is, and I think this is pretty damn cool, and now that everybody is an expert on all things EOs and government process, thanks to me, you'll start seeing EOs that came out in like April, March, start being referenced in further EOs. And this is actually how government policy works, right? You start at the top with an EO, or what is typically put out in a new administration is the national security strategy that then goes down to the DoD, and you get the national defense strategy. And that's where you get Department of Defense direction, Department of Defense instruction that say how we're going to do those things. So in these EOs, you're even seeing them nest into each other where they're referencing back and getting more particular on how they want the EO executed. This is a very, very active executive branch in the EO National Security Council side. The EO also targets workforce and education. This has been a huge problem. There are programs within the Department of Defense that I think are phenomenal that go after not only workforce, but this kind of concept of industry 4.0, additive manufacturing, CNC machining, metrology, robotic welding, right? The things that are factories of the future, that some are robotic and some are automated, but then some still have humans involved in them, and training that workforce and focusing on what's needed there in the education pipelines. And I don't mean education in we need more PhDs doing PhD things. I'm talking about like vocational schools and people who actually know how engineering works and how architecture works to be able to do this new breed of maritime dominance. Let's see why. And then finally, the biggest recommendation here that I have is a 45-day review of our shipbuilding plan. Our U.S. Navy shipbuilding plan is a 10-year plan of how they're going to build, deliver ships. This has been a huge point of contention on the Hill, in the DoD, because there's just not enough workforce. There's delays across the board in building and repairing ships. They're expensive, really expensive, and it's a 10-year process that really doesn't address the new things that can be brought to maritime dominance, specifically unmanned. How do we take autonomous and robotic systems in the maritime domain and supplement the shortfalls in the traditional manned shipbuilding base? Hopefully this 45-day review just shows that, hey, in every way, shape, and form that we're going to have a delay here, here's how we could back it up with some kind of automation, robotics, or autonomous system. That's my hope. We'll see. As always, why does this matter? So what? Okay, it's super cool. I know about stuff now. Why does it matter? Why it matters is we know that we will have better demand signals and steadier demand signals for things in the maritime base. Hopefully we will get a longer look at, hey, we're going to buy this many this year. Now, it's not going to say we're going to buy your thing, but it will say we're going to buy this many of a thing. I think the last administration tried to do a really good thing when they rolled out the Replicator initiative and said, we are going to buy hundreds of thousands of drones. Now, in execution, it didn't work out as well as anybody would have liked, but that's fine. At least they're putting the demand signal out there. At least they started attempting to define a market and say, we are going to buy hundreds of thousands of drones. People need to know that because people need to know where to invest. So we're going to see that. We're going to see real capital come in to the shipbuilding place, and not only in the building of the ships, hulls, combat systems, sensors, sea lift, the support around it, but in those economic or maritime opportunity zones where if you're just a service provider or you're a materials provider, you can add to the shipyard ecosystem in a way that makes life suck less and get paid and incentivized to do it, which is super cool. It'll be easier to sell modular and commercial-ish maritime things. Again, there's going to be a limit here where your thing is not going to be a commercially available aircraft carrier, and we all know that, but that's fine. All the way up until that part, figure out how you fit in this process. Unmanned systems and repair work gets a lot of attention. So if you are in robotics, if you're in advanced or additive manufacturing, this is the opening, because I'll tell you what, we were at, what was it? We were at the congressional breakfast at Modern Day Marine, and the deputy commandant for CD&I, capability development and integration, I want to say. Basically, there's the commandant, there's the assistant commandant, and then there's a bunch of deputy commandants, and they're in charge of like big things in the Marine Corps, like aviation. So DC CD&I is the combat development integration guy, basically the new things guy, the new requirements guy. And he said his biggest issue right now is repair parts, because Marines are getting stranded out on ships because boilers are breaking. And guess who doesn't? Guess what there are none of? Boiler parts, right? So if you're in additive or advanced manufacturing, repair in shipyards, maybe, well, on the manufacturing side, yes, but then also on the repair side, and getting those things out of repair and back into service is going to be critically important. There have been times in our recent history, last year or two, where the Marines didn't have enough ships to keep up their steady deployment cycle because they couldn't get them out of repair. And when the civil war in Sudan went down, they had to send a ship that wasn't an amphibious assault craft. They sent this really cool ship called the ESB, the Expeditionary Sea Base, which is basically like Legos. It's like 3 Walmarts stocked on top of each other, and you can just like modularly put things together like Legos, and they like built out this whole ship to go do the job of an LHA or an LHD that wasn't available to the Marine Corps because it was in repair. Like, that's unacceptable. So we're going to see a lot more like that. Repair is going to be important if you're in additive or advanced manufacturing. Great. And then finally, it looks at allied co-investment. Like I said, right now we know that the U.S. does not build ships. We don't have a robust maritime industry, and we know that some of our partners do. We see this coming out of initiatives like AUKUS. We know that Japan and South Korea have shipbuilding capacity, and we got to figure out how to produce and invest with our partners and allies. All right, so what do I do today? Right? First and foremost, frame your products and services for modular naval adaptation. Right? Open systems. MOSA is the law of the land. You must be modular and open. Do not come to the Navy with, I've got this top to bottom solution, just buy my thing. Nope, that's not going to work. The government buyers want MOSA. They want modularity. If you make 80% of what they want and then your other 20% sucks, they want to be able to pull that 20 part out and put someone else in that they know is a rock star in that thing. And you have to be prepared to do business like that. On the other token, if you're the 20% guy, start pointing out where the people who make the 80% solutions suck at the 20%, and show up and go, hey, we're modular, we're open, we can plug in and we can fill that gap because we do that thing a lot better than they do. Use language that aligns with everything, right? Just in accordance with EO, blah, 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 blah. We are X, Y, and Z. Find the places in all of these EOs where you're already doing that thing or you're going to do that thing, and use that as a differentiator and position yourself against your competition and make life easy for the acquisition professionals that you're trying to sell to. Be prepared for OSC. Okay, OSC is great, but, and again, I'm going to like twist Jason's arm to come in and do this, but OSC is not like a SIBR, or it's not like an AFWorks, right? It's a loan program. You're getting a loan from the federal government. It's not who you know or like what does your pitch deck look like. The government has to make an investment in you. The folks that work over at OSC basically run a bank. You need to be investment ready. If you know that you do a thing that is going to require large scale debt to get there, if you need to scale manufacturing, make capital investments, and it aligns with maritime dominance EO, be ready to get funded. Be ready to have lender grade financials, your backlogs, your margins, your collateral, what the business looks like in and out, so you can get one of these loans, because a loan at 50 or $100 million is a whole lot better than taking venture capital at that rate. So be ready to be investable. Again, with all of these, they'll be in the EO cheat sheet, but target the reviews. Know when these are going to happen, especially in the maritime one. There are multiple dates for different key elements of this EO's implementation or their reviews or the pass back that has to happen between the different executive branch offices. Know when these are happening. Target them and keep your eye out. Set calendar dates for like, oh, this is supposed to happen today. Let me check the news. Let me check the Federal Register. Let me check the, White House website to make sure that these things are happening and you're staying aligned with them. And that's for all these EOs. So we're going to put them all on a cheat sheet and it'll be in the link for all these. Start talking to the people in the Navy that are going to need to do this, right? This is NAVC, PEO USC, PEO IWS, PEO Unmanned, in the PMO offices for infrastructure. These are people who are going to do the thing. If you don't know the list of people I just rattled off and you work in the maritime world, you need to. And then finally, if you're thinking about making investments, if you're growing your company, think about really aligning where they're going to be putting these opportunity zones. I'm not saying move your business to a place for that for no other reason. But if you work in maritime, it probably doesn't make sense to put your business in Idaho. Look at the places where you know are economically depressed, that are close to where the things that are being made, and favor those for proximity to the shipyards as they look to develop these areas. At the end of the day, none of this is going to be fast, but this is all good news. Know more, learn more, sell more. That's it. See you next one.